I'm Clem Nwankwo, Executive Director of Policy and Legal Advocacy Center PLAC and convener of the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room. PLAC did not come up with the idea of organizing the Situation Room. The Situation Room is a creation of several organizations who are working on election issues, who have experience with democracy and who have a strong desire to see our electoral process improve significantly. We came together and agreed that we needed civil society observation of the electoral process following what is going on. It's not the usual kind of observation, because the usual kind of observation means that people go out on voting day, see the voting, and report back to themselves and issue a report. The Situation Room is situational, which means that we are looking at live events. The preparations by INEC, the involvement of the security personnel in elections, on election day, actually following up the day-to-day, the minute-by-minute development of the administration of election. And where we do find a concern, we are able to follow up immediately with the agency involved, whether it is INEC or the police or whatever agency is involved. We're able to follow up to say, this is what we're immediately observing, and we need you to take remedial action. So that's the whole philosophy around Situation Room. And we've been doing this since the elections in 2011. In 2011, when Situation Room observed that elections were going on, but sensitive materials were not available for use, we immediately walked into INEC's office and said, look, voting is going on, people don't have the result sheets, people don't have necessary sensitive materials, and you cannot go on with this election. And INEC in 2011 had to postpone the election that was scheduled for April 2nd, and that was already ongoing. It had to postpone it because of the observations arising from what the Situation Room saw on the field. That election was rescheduled for a couple of days after. So the Situation Room is very much live involved in elections, and that's the way we have operated since then. And we've been very objective, very fair, very non-partisan. For us, it's not an issue who wins the elections, because most times our report is by the moment, and when we do issue that report that determines whether the process has been followed, it's usually before the results are announced, just to emphasize that we're not necessarily interested in who has won the election, but that the process has gone really well. The process includes the conduct of everyone, the political parties, INEC, the security, events around polling units, and so if there are people buying votes, then it's a major concern. It's an electoral offense, actually, and we have escalated these issues publicly. We did have two elections in Osun State for the governorship. One was on September the 22nd, and then the subsequent one was the 25th or so. The one that held on the 22nd, which we refer to as Osun 1, 22nd September of 2018, we were generally satisfied with the conduct of that election, including the conduct of security personnel. When INEC now came up with the indication that it would have to rerun election in 7 polling units, we also had Situation Room on ground to observe that election, and for us that was a scandal rather than an election, what we call the Osun 2, simply because all of the indications of what should not happen during election day was happening with respect to Osun 2, and we were very clear in saying that the election was completely irregular, was completely out of tune with, that's the second in 7 polling units, was completely unacceptable. And we blamed INEC, and we said that INEC should not have announced results arising from that process. We also were shocked at the conduct of security personnel, who seemed to be in cahoot with thugs from political parties. So we've been unequivocal in stating things as they are. The Situation Room has followed the electoral process very closely. Of course, PLAC being part of Situation Room has been part of that. And we've been very clear in saying that there has been improvements in the electoral process. From the period in 2007 when the elections was roundly criticized by everyone, including the president who won the elections, President Umaru Yar'Adua, who then, in acknowledgement of the failure of that election in 2007, announced the creation of an electoral reform committee headed by Justice Uwais. Everyone was very clear in pointing out that the elections were a farce in 2007. But we've come quite some way since then, and we've seen improvements in election administration in Nigeria. I would not say that we're there yet in terms of having nothing more to do. There's a lot more to do. But we think that on the part of INEC, there has been significant improvement. It still needs to improve a lot. On the part of the security personnel, I would still say there's been improvements, except for rogue moments when you see, as happened in Oshu too, or in Rivers State Assembly elections that happened recently. Those moments dampen all of the efforts that have been made to improve the electoral process. I wasn't worried. I was shocked that he didn't assent to it. I didn't see any basis for not assenting to it, and I thought he did himself a huge disservice. That would have been an opportunity to say that I, President of Nigeria, support electoral reform, and he didn't do that. He missed a huge opportunity. So I think it was sad he didn't sign it. I think that there were improvements, there were reforms contained in that amendment, which has been lost for the 2019 elections. My hope is that when it's no longer a contentious issue after the elections in February and March 2nd, that the National Assembly will revisit the amendment and get the president to sign it into law. Even if it's not been used for the 2019 elections, it would represent an improvement on the electoral process if it's signed into law. I don't know about genuine. I think the most important thing he said was that it was not a good idea to amend the elections the electoral law too close to an election. All of the other issues he mentioned, which are typographical, are basically further excuses, and in any case could be corrected by a further amendment. But when you say that amendment to the law is too close to an election and shouldn't happen, and you cite the ECOWAS protocol, you cite that only when there is controversial amendments. And we need to go to the history of that ECOWAS protocol, and that relates to countries in West Africa where incumbents were changing the laws to extend their legibility to run for elections. Most constitutions provide for 2 terms, and countries in West Africa were amending constitutions close to the elections to allow them have extended tenure for 3rd term. So that was the rationale behind that protocol. So it talks about substantial amendment to the electoral law. There's nothing in the bills that were proposed that were substantial. ECOWAS protocol also talked about controversial. There was nothing. The president himself admitted that he supports all that was in the bill. All he was saying is that it's too close. If you support it and it's not controversial and doesn't go to the roots of the elections, then why are you not signing it? So his excuse about the ECOWAS protocol did not contemplate a situation where it's an innocuous amendment that nobody is upset with. So I don't understand why he didn't sign it. They may have their reasons. I am not convinced that the accreditation and voting at the same time has any damaging effect on the electoral process. I think that following from the elections in 2015, a lot of us came to the conclusion that you needed to minimize the amount of time people voted because of the delays, that when you accredit and people have to wait till 12 o'clock and come back and vote, some people don't come back. So we found a discrepancy between numbers of persons accredited and numbers of persons that voted. And then we began to find out that it became subject to abuse. So if you've captured 50 people to vote and only 50 people accredited and only 30 people turn out to vote, that abuses have meant that sometimes electoral officials, conniving with political parties, had filled the gap by ensuring that you get at least close to 50 by just thumbprinting ballot papers and throwing them into the box. So those abuses were there. I do not understand or do not share the view that the simultaneous accreditation and voting represents a major electoral challenge for the country, and I think that that particular provision in the guideline is a response to the abuses from previous experience. INEC has said that it is not using incidence form. What it has done is to create a ballot paper, and this is the sample of ballot paper we've received, and at the bottom here, if someone votes, that person will also thumbprint